God is our refuge and strength. He never sleeps the awakening that happens when everything feels still. There is a moment in life that cannot be explained, only experienced. It arrives quietly, without warning, when the noise around you fades, but the noise inside you becomes louder than ever. It is the moment when you start to realize that what you thought was distance might actually be presence, and what you thought was abandonment might be something far more intentional than you can understand. You begin to notice that not everything that feels empty is truly empty. Some silences are not absence, they are depth. Some pauses are not rejection, they are alignment. And in that strange tension between what you feel and what you cannot see, something begins to shift inside you. This is not the kind of awakening that brings immediate answers. It is the kind that strips you of certainty, so you can finally learn trust. Because trust does not grow where everything is clear. It grows where clarity is removed, and only faith remains standing. And in that space, where your understanding reaches its limit, something greater begins to reveal itself in ways you never expected. Not through loud answers, but through quiet persistence. Not through visible change, but through invisible holding. The more you sit with this tension, the more you start to sense that nothing about your life has been truly unattended. Even in the moments you thought you were forgotten, something was still holding the structure of your days together. And that realization, although subtle, begins to change everything. Because once you start to feel that there is more happening than what you can see, you also begin to question whether you were ever truly alone in any of it. The weight of feeling alone while never being abandoned. There is a specific kind of pain that does not come from what is happening, but from what you believe is not happening. It is the feeling of being unseen in your struggle, unheard in your prayers, and unanswered in your waiting. But what if the absence you feel is not the absence that exists? What if the silence you are experiencing is not the silence of neglect, but the silence of something being carefully sustained beyond your perception? In this space, your emotions become the loudest evidence against your own peace. They tell you that delay means denial, that waiting means rejection, and that struggle means being left behind. Yet none of these conclusions are absolute truth. They are interpretations shaped by pressure and pain. And still, even in that emotional turbulence, something remains steady beneath it all. A stability you cannot trace, but you continuously depend on. A foundation you cannot see, but you are still standing on. This is where the shift begins, not in what changes outside, but in what starts to soften inside. The assumption that you are alone begins to weaken, not because everything becomes clear, but because something deeper starts to feel undeniably consistent. And that consistency becomes harder to ignore the longer you sit with it. Because even when everything feels uncertain, your existence has not collapsed. Even when answers are missing, your life continues to be held together in ways you did not orchestrate. And that raises a question you cannot easily dismiss anymore. If everything truly depended only on chance, would anything have held this far without breaking completely? That question does not demand an answer yet. It simply opens the door for something deeper to enter. There is a fragile moment in the human heart where interpretation becomes more powerful than reality itself. It happens when silence is no longer received as silence, but as meaning. And most of the time, that meaning is shaped by fear rather than truth. When nothing seems to respond to your prayers, your mind begins to fill the gap with conclusions. It tells you that distance means disconnection, that delay means denial, that quiet means abandonment. But none of these assumptions are born from certainty. They are born from discomfort. Silence is neutral, yet the human mind rarely treats it that way. It rushes to assign emotion to it, as if the absence of sound must always carry the weight of absence of presence. But not everything that is still is empty, and not everything that is quiet is gone. In this tension, something subtle begins to unfold inside you. The more you try to interpret silence, the more exhausted you become. Because silence was never meant to be decoded under pressure. It was meant to be experienced with trust. And trust is not built in the moments where everything speaks clearly. It is built in the moments where nothing speaks at all, yet something deeper still holds you in place. There are times when life does not offer explanations because explanations would weaken what is being formed within you. If everything were instantly understood, nothing within you would be stretched beyond its current limits. And so silence becomes a kind of unseen space where inner transformation begins to take shape without permission from your emotions. You may not recognize it while it is happening, but something in you is being restructured in ways that will only make sense later. The real shift begins when you stop demanding silence to become speech, and instead allow it to become formation. The invisible vigil that never ends there is a truth that does not depend on what you feel in the moment. It exists beyond emotional fluctuation, beyond human perception, beyond the limits of what your senses can confirm. Even when your mind is restless, there is a steadiness that does not move. Even when your thoughts are uncertain, there is an order that does not collapse. Even when your perception is limited, there is a reality that continues uninterrupted. This is where the idea of being watched over takes on a deeper meaning, not as a distant observation, but as continuous attention that does not sleep, does not pause, and does not lose awareness of a single detail of your existence. And yet, because this vigilance is invisible, it is often forgotten. Not because it disappears, but because it does not demand to be seen in order to remain effective. You are accustomed to equating presence with visibility, but some of the most essential forms of support in your life have never been visible at all. There is a quiet architecture holding your path together, even in the moments where everything feels unstable. Decisions are being redirected, outcomes are being softened, collisions are being avoided in ways you will only recognize in hindsight, and this changes the way you understand your current struggle. It suggests that what feels like chaos may actually be a controlled unfolding, even if you are not yet able to recognize the pattern. The deeper you reflect on this, the more a subtle realization begins to rise. Perhaps nothing has been as unguarded as it seemed. Perhaps what felt like randomness has been guided by a logic far beyond immediate comprehension. And that realization prepares something within you for the next truth, one that will challenge not only what you feel, but what you believe about timing itself. There comes a point where the human spirit begins to realize that control was never as stable as it once believed. You try to hold outcomes, manage timing, predict responses, and secure certainty. Yet life continues to move in directions that were never fully yours to command. This realization does not arrive as collapse, but as quiet exposure. Slowly, you begin to notice how much energy has been spent trying to manage what was always larger than your reach. And in that recognition, something within you starts to loosen. Control often feels like safety, but it is actually tension disguised as stability. The more tightly you grip life, the more fragile everything feels, because control depends on conditions staying predictable, and life was never designed to remain predictable. And so, a deeper question begins to rise inside you. What if peace was never meant to come from control, but from release? What if strength was never about holding everything together, but about trusting even when nothing can be held? In that space, surrender is not defeat. It is the moment where resistance stops pretending to be protection. It is where the soul stops exhausting itself, trying to direct every outcome, and begins to breathe again. This is not an instant transformation. It happens gradually, in layers. First in thought, then in emotion, then in behavior. You begin to notice that what once felt urgent no longer carries the same weight, not because it disappeared, but because your relationship with it is changing. And in that shift, something subtle but powerful begins to emerge, a sense that you are not as responsible for holding the entire structure of your life together as you once believed. That realization does not remove responsibility, but it removes illusion. The illusion that everything depends solely on your effort, your timing, your understanding. As that illusion weakens, space is created for something else to enter. A deeper trust that does not rely on full comprehension. A steadiness that does not depend on visible certainty. And it is in this space of quiet surrender that the next truth begins to reveal itself. One that does not simply change how you see your situation, but changes how you interpret waiting itself. The language hidden inside what cannot yet be understood. There are experiences in life that refuse immediate interpretation. Not because they lack meaning, but because their meaning exists beyond the current capacity of understanding. When something does not make sense, the natural reaction is to force explanation, to label it, define it, and resolve it mentally. But not everything in life is designed to be solved in the moment it appears. Some situations are structured like unfolding messages. Their meaning is distributed across time, not delivered all at once. And until the final piece arrives, the full picture remains intentionally incomplete. This incompleteness is not a flaw in your journey. It is part of its design. Because if everything were understood immediately, transformation would be shallow, and growth would be limited to what is already known. In this way, confusion is not always a sign of being lost. Sometimes it is a sign of being inside a process that is still forming itself around you. And this reframes the way you experience uncertainty. Instead of seeing it as failure of clarity, you begin to see it as a stage of development that has not yet finished speaking. There is a deeper intelligence operating within timing itself. Not rushing, not delaying arbitrarily, but aligning each piece in a sequence that only becomes visible when enough distance has been gained. And as you sit with this, a quiet realization begins to emerge. Perhaps what you are waiting to understand is not delayed. Perhaps it is still being written into a form you can eventually receive, without distortion. That possibility changes everything about how you endure the present moment, because it shifts waiting from emptiness into preparation. And from here, the narrative moves toward a deeper unveiling of what is being arranged beyond what the eyes can currently perceive. There are seasons in life when everything feels scattered, disconnected, and without direction. Events unfold without explanation. Doors close without warning, and paths seem to dissolve just as you begin to trust them. In those moments, the mind naturally concludes that nothing is being guided, that everything is random, and that stability has been lost. But perception in times of pressure is rarely complete. It sees fragments, not the whole structure. What feels like chaos is often a system still in motion, a process that cannot yet be understood because it is still assembling itself in real time. And while it is unfolding, it does not announce its logic. It only reveals its meaning later. This is where a deeper form of awareness begins to develop. The realization that disorder is not always the absence of order, but sometimes order that has not yet revealed its pattern. In this space, patience becomes more than waiting. It becomes the willingness to remain present while meaning is still forming beneath the surface of experience. And something subtle begins to change within you. Instead of asking only "why is this happening?" you start to sense another question rising. What is this becoming? That shift is significant because it moves you from interpretation of the present moment into awareness of ongoing transformation. There are movements in life that only make sense when viewed from a distance you do not yet have. And until that distance is reached, trust becomes the bridge between confusion and understanding. This does not remove the tension of uncertainty, but it reframes it, not as abandonment of direction, but as immersion in a process too complex to be seen all at once. And as this awareness deepens, something within you begins to soften. The need to resolve everything immediately starts to weaken, not because answers have arrived, but because a quiet confidence begins to form beneath the surface. That confidence does not come from explanation, it comes from experience, from the subtle recognition that even in your most confusing seasons, something within your life has continued to move forward rather than collapse. And that realization opens the way for a deeper understanding of timing itself, where delay is no longer interpreted as emptiness, but as preparation unfolding in disguise. When waiting becomes the silent training of the soul, waiting is often misunderstood as inactivity, as if nothing meaningful is happening during the pause between desire and fulfillment. But in reality, waiting is one of the most active inner processes a human being can experience. It is in waiting that expectations are refined, attachments are exposed, and emotional foundations are tested in ways that rapid change would never reveal. When nothing seems to move externally, everything begins to move internally. Beliefs are questioned, priorities are reshaped, strength is redefined, not by what is achieved, but by what is sustained without collapse. This is why waiting feels heavy, not because it is empty, but because it is full of invisible development that has not yet become visible outcome. And in this hidden development, something essential is being formed, a kind of resilience that cannot be taught in moments of comfort, only discovered in moments of suspension. Over time, what once felt unbearable begins to transform, not because the circumstances change, but because your inner structure becomes capable of holding more than it could before. And that shift often goes unnoticed while it is happening. Only later does it become clear that the waiting period was not absence of progress, but preparation for a different level of strength. In this understanding, delay is no longer an interruption. It becomes a training ground for endurance, perception, and depth. And from here, the narrative moves toward a more delicate revelation, one that shows how protection can sometimes disguise itself in forms that initially feel like denial. There are moments when life seems to hold back what you most desire, and the immediate interpretation is often frustration, confusion, or even disappointment. You begin to feel that something is being withheld, as if the timing is working against you instead of for you. But not every delay is a denial, and not every closed door is a loss. Some interruptions are not obstacles, but invisible protections placed between you and outcomes you are not yet prepared to carry. In the present moment, you only see what is not happening. You feel the absence of movement, the absence of answers, the absence of arrival. But what you cannot yet perceive is what has been prevented, redirected, or softened on your behalf. This is where perspective begins to shift, because what feels like being stopped may actually be being shielded from impact, exposure, or consequences that would have reshaped your path in ways you do not currently understand. Protection is not always experienced as comfort. Sometimes it is experienced as frustration, because it interrupts expectation. Yet, interruption is not always interference. Sometimes it is guidance operating beneath awareness. And in this space, something within you begins to reevaluate the meaning of timing. You start to consider that what has not happened yet may not be missing at all, but carefully positioned within a larger sequence that is not fully unfolded. This does not erase the tension of waiting, but it reframes its purpose. It suggests that unseen intelligence may be arranging outcomes not only based on desire, but also on readiness, alignment, and long-term stability. And as this understanding deepens, another awareness begins to surface, that even in moments of delay, something within you has been preserved, shaped, and guided without your conscious recognition. This realization does not remove uncertainty, but it transforms it into trust that is no longer based on explanation, but on reflection of past outcomes you only later understood. And from this place, the narrative moves into a quieter truth, where rest is no longer escape from life, but a sacred space where inner strength is restored, even in the middle of struggle. The moment the soul learns to rest inside the battle, there is a kind of rest that does not depend on circumstances becoming easy. It emerges instead in the middle of difficulty, when the external world is still unresolved, but something internal begins to stabilize. This rest is not escape. It is presence without panic. It is the ability to remain within the struggle, without allowing the struggle to define your entire interstate. At first, this feels unnatural. The mind resists it, because it has been conditioned to equate peace with resolution. But slowly, another awareness begins to form. That peace can exist even when resolution has not yet arrived. And in that awareness, a shift takes place. You begin to notice that not every moment of tension requires immediate reaction. Not every uncertainty requires immediate conclusion. Some things can simply be held without being solved. This changes your relationship with pressure. Instead of being consumed by it, you begin to observe it. Instead of being pulled into it, you begin to stand beside it. And in that subtle distance, clarity begins to return. Not because everything has changed, but because your internal response to everything has begun to shift. This is where strength becomes redefined. Not as constant action, but as the ability to remain steady when action is not yet required. And from this steadiness, something deeper begins to surface. A sense that you are not only surviving the moment, but being quietly sustained through it in ways that are not always visible. And this realization leads toward a deeper encounter with vulnerability itself, where human limitation and spiritual strength meet in a single point of transformation. There is a moment in every journey where human limitation becomes undeniable. You reach the edge of your own strength, where effort is no longer enough, and understanding no longer provides comfort. It is here that vulnerability stops being something you try to hide and becomes something you are forced to face. At first, this encounter feels like breaking. The mind interprets it as weakness, as if reaching your limit means you have failed to endure. But what if reaching your limit is not failure, but entry into a deeper layer of support that was never dependent on your strength alone? In this space, something begins to change in how you perceive yourself. The pressure that once defined your identity starts to loosen. The belief that everything depends entirely on your capacity begins to soften under the weight of lived experience. And in that softening, a different kind of strength starts to appear. Not a strength built on control or certainty, but one that emerges precisely when those things are no longer available. This is the paradox of transformation. That what feels like the end of your ability often becomes the beginning of a different form of endurance, one that is quieter, steadier, and less dependent on visible effort. You begin to notice that even in moments where you feel overwhelmed, something within you has continued to hold. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but consistently enough to prevent complete collapse. And this realization shifts the focus inward. Instead of only asking why you are struggling, you start to sense what has been sustaining you through it. There is a presence in the way you recover after exhaustion. There is guidance in the way certain outcomes do not fully destroy you, even when they could have. There is a quiet continuity in your existence that does not match the fragility you feel. And this tension between what you feel and what actually holds you creates a deeper awareness that your life has never been carried by only one source of strength. And from this awareness, something even more subtle begins to unfold. A recognition that transformation often happens when no one is watching, when nothing appears to be changing, yet everything internally is being rebuilt. The quiet transformation that happens when no one is watching. There is a kind of change that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with visible milestones or external validation. Instead, it unfolds silently beneath the surface of daily experience, unnoticed even by the person it is transforming. At first, it feels like nothing is happening. The days look similar, the challenges remain, and the answers still have not fully arrived. But beneath that apparent stillness, something subtle is reorganizing within you. Thought patterns begin to shift without permission. Reactions that once felt automatic begin to weaken. Emotional responses that once controlled your inner world start to lose intensity. And because these changes are quiet, they are often overlooked. You only recognize them later, when something that used to break you no longer has the same effect. This is the nature of deep transformation. It does not depend on external acknowledgement. It depends on internal restructuring that cannot be measured in real time. And in this process, something important happens. You begin to realize that growth was never absent, only invisible. And invisibility does not mean inactivity. It means the work was happening in a dimension you were not trained to observe. This realization begins to reshape your understanding of progress itself. Progress is no longer defined only by arrival, but by internal capacity being expanded without immediate recognition. And from here, the narrative moves toward a profound realization that nothing in your story has ever been truly disconnected from purpose. Even when it appeared fragmented or unclear, there is a moment of clarity that does not arrive as noise or excitement, but as stillness so deep it changes the way you interpret your entire history. It is the moment when you begin to suspect that nothing you went through was truly random, even the parts that once felt meaningless or painfully disconnected. At first, this idea feels uncomfortable, because it challenges the way you separated your experiences into good and wasted, meaningful and lost. But as this awareness deepens, those categories begin to dissolve, revealing a larger continuity beneath everything you lived. You start to notice that certain endings made room for beginnings you could not have planned. Certain delays positioned you in ways that later revealed protection. Certain losses redirected your attention toward directions you would have otherwise ignored completely. And slowly, a new perception begins to form. Not that everything was easy, but that everything had a place within a structure you were not able to see at the time. This does not erase pain, it recontextualizes it. It shifts the narrative from fragmentation to hidden coherence, where even confusion becomes part of a larger unfolding process that was never without direction. And in this recognition, something within you begins to settle. The need to constantly reinterpret your past starts to soften, because you are no longer trying to find meaning in isolation, but beginning to sense meaning in connection. There is a quiet intelligence that seems to thread through moments you once believed were unrelated, not as coincidence, but as a subtle alignment that only becomes visible when enough time has passed to reveal the pattern. And as this awareness grows, a deeper question begins to arise within you. If nothing was truly outside of order, then what does that say about the present moment you are still trying to understand? That question does not rush for an answer. It simply opens you to the possibility that even now, in what feels uncertain, something is still coherently unfolding. And from this space of expanded perception, the final movement of understanding begins to emerge, where timing itself is no longer seen as delay, but as precision. You are still learning how to recognize the quiet truth that changes everything about waiting. Waiting is often experienced as suspension, as if life has paused between two meaningful points. But what if waiting is not suspension at all, but precise positioning within a process that is still forming its final shape? In this perspective, time is not empty. It is active with adjustments that are not yet visible. What feels like stillness may actually be refinement, where elements are being aligned beyond the reach of immediate awareness. and this reframes how you relate to what has not yet arrived. Instead of interpreting it as absence, you begin to see it as something still being prepared in a way that cannot be rushed without distortion. This does not make waiting easier in a superficial sense, but it gives it depth. It transforms it from passive endurance into active participation in a process that is larger than immediate perception. And in that understanding, impatience begins to lose some of its authority. Not because desire disappears, but because trust begins to occupy more internal space than urgency. You start to sense that timing is not random distribution of events, but careful sequencing that only reveals its intelligence when viewed from a wider frame than the present moment allows. And this realization changes your inner posture. You are no longer only waiting for something to happen. You are beginning to understand that something is already happening in ways you cannot yet fully see. And from here, everything begins to converge toward a final understanding, one that does not simply explain your journey, but transforms the way you stand within it. There is a final shift in awareness that does not arrive with intensity, but with a quiet certainty that settles deep within the soul. It is not a new idea, but a new way of seeing everything that has already happened. At this point, the struggle is no longer interpreted only as struggle. The silence is no longer interpreted only as silence. The waiting is no longer interpreted only as waiting. Something deeper begins to unify all of these experiences into a single realization. You start to sense that through every moment you thought you were alone, there was still continuity holding your life together in ways you could not coordinate or even fully perceive. Not as a distant concept, but as a consistent presence woven through your entire journey. And this realization does not come to remove your past, but to reinterpret it with clarity that was not available before. What once felt like fragmentation now begins to appear as a process of formation. What once felt like abandonment now begins to reveal itself as unseen guidance. In this understanding, fear loses its absolute authority, not because challenges disappear, but because their meaning changes. They are no longer final definitions of your story, but temporary chapters within a larger unfolding, and something within you becomes still in a different way. Not the stillness of confusion, but the stillness of recognition, the sense that even when you did not understand, you were not without direction. This is where faith becomes more than belief. It becomes perception, a way of seeing that no longer depends only on immediate evidence, but on the awareness that your life has carried coherence even in its most uncertain seasons. And in that coherence, a final truth begins to rise above everything else. You were never outside of care, even in the moments you were convinced you were. And now, as this awareness settles, everything that came before is no longer separate pieces. It becomes a single narrative of becoming, held together by a presence that does not sleep, does not abandon, and does not lose sight of you. This is the ending that is also a beginning, not because everything is resolved, but because you finally understand that you were always being sustained, even when you could not feel it. The story does not close in absence. It closes in recognition.